hidden treasures of the 119th Psalm. How fun. Today we get to dig in to the Dalet section, which I believe may have well been King David's favorite letter because his name had two of them in it, right? It's David, which would be, or David, you'd hear it say different ways, but anyway, it is Dalet, Vav, Dalet. And there's no doubt that the Hebrew sages have taught for centuries, obviously, that was David was so encompassed in his name. Because the Dalet, the two basic ideas of the Dalet are, number one, is humility or humbleness. And the second one is a door. Well, they say that the door to spirituality comes through humbleness. And so when it comes to this idea of servant leadership, David Amalek, you know, he was a master of that. And so it's really beautiful how he illuminates this letter for us. And you can see him in the 25th verse just jump right into the idea of humility in so many different ways, which is just unbelievably enlightening from my perspective. So the way the 25th verse reads, starts out, "My soul cleaveth unto the dust." That's pretty humble. "Quicken thou me according to thy word." So that word cleave is an amazing word, and it starts with a Dalet, just like every verse in the Dalet section will. And there's no doubt that he uses that word a couple times in this section of 8 verses on the Dalet, because it is so significant to this idea of the Dalet. The word is debak in Hebrew, and it has to do with like a door, a humble door to the beginning or to the pursuing. Because the idea of cleaving, right, that the first time we hear that is a man will, you know, cleave to his wife, leave his father and mother. And the idea, maybe you've heard some teaching on a soul tie, that people want, their souls want to get tied to things, they want to pursue things. And of course, this was designed for us to cleave to God. But unfortunately, our souls have a tendency to cleave to other things. And so here we go. And when we begin to cleave, that pursuing idea is in there, and it's in that race. So the Dalet is this door, and then the bet we've talked about, you know, much is the house or the kingdom. And so we got this door to the kingdom that has to do with pursuing. So, and what are you going to cleave to? What are you going to pursue? What door are you choosing? Door number 1, which this one is obviously the dust. Well, this teaching is beyond fabulous, and Jesus, of course, gives us a lot of what this actually means when he describes it in John chapter 12, verse 24, where he talks about unless a seed goes into the earth, right, it's all alone. But if it goes into the earth, it will grow up and bear much fruit. Well, here King David is showing us something about dirt, about dust specifically. And the dust that he uses here is the very dust that man is made out of, because dust is the ultimate human solvent, right? Because we are going back that way, you know. And the idea of dying to self, of falling in the ground, and this humility picture is just beyond cool. So when he says that his soul cleaves to the dust, this is such a beautiful picture of humility, and it's such a beautiful picture of what Jesus talked about, dying to self, but and taking up your cross and following him. But then also very cool, as you're studying this particular verse, is check out Psalms 22, where he talks about his soul, you know, is cleaving there too. And he's talking about cleaving to the dust in Psalm 22 and the dust of death. And so, you know, David knew well what he was talking about when he said he was cleaving to the dust. And then he says, "Quicken thou me according to thy word." And again, that word is life. But very beautifully in this particular time that he wrote the word quicken, you won't see this many times in the Bible, but he uses a nun in the, see, the letter Hey means life, and then they use a Yud to say life. But in this case, after the yud, he used a nun, which is like a seed. So he's illuminating the picture that in order to get, to be a seed that's going to sprout, you got to get in the dirt. And so it's just an amazing, amazing picture that King David, Dalet Vav Dalet, is going to show us about the door to humility here, as this idea of cleaving unto the dust is just the beginning of this whole particular face of God. So when we think about, we've studied this contrast. It's like the Gimel is the great and the Dalet is the humble. The Gimel is the rich and the Dalet is the poor. In other words, there's this big contrast right here, but it's a picture of who Jesus was. It's beyond great, beyond anything you can think as far as Gimel. But at the same point in time, he humbled himself and he became as low as he could get down there with us. And so this picture is being illustrated again to us as we go from this, how great is our God, that he would humble himself to become a man. And this is the beginning of where we're going with this Dalet section, this picture of God. It's beyond beautiful. Thank you for listening today.